Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, Barka Desua.
Barka Mude. How are you? Ramadan Kareem to all those who are participating in the fasting. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. We have the tradition to ask our all speaker about how are you taking care of your body, mind, spirit. And after that, I'll hand over to my president, Patricia, to start the conversation with you.
Okay. Are you asking me about how I'm taking care of oh my goodness me. Well, I think we've for us in the United Nations, we started with a business continuity plan, which put us straight back in our homes. And so a lot of the support has been in that new way of working, how to keep people engaged, how to ensure that we're reaching out and taking care of their well-being, the check-ins, the things we didn't imagine before were a challenge at home in a very small workspace, managing your family, managing time, because time now just has no boundaries, it keeps going. And all of that, just taking into those considerations and really basically keeping in touch with our people around the world, from New York to the furthest points in our over 130 countries that we are today. But mostly it's just keeping in contact, it's listening, it's giving support, and it's getting on with the job, because that's really what we are doing. We're on the front lines in many places and we're trying to support others.
Thanks so much, and it's just a real pleasure to meet you, Deputy Secretary General. I'm going to just plunge right into the questions because I know you have limited time, and thank you again for joining us. So my first question for you today is, how is the United Nations responding to the COVID-19 crisis, and how can Sustainable Development Goals help, or will they help, accelerate recovery? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Patricia, it's lovely to join you, and thank you for having me. Well, I mean, this has been very complex. It's unprecedented in its challenge. COVID appears as a health emergency, but very quickly we know that it's actually a global crisis with human dimensions that we have not seen since World War II. And in a lot of ways, the prescriptions that we put for the COVID health have these side effects on the socioeconomic side. So very quickly, putting many people in developing countries in a position where they may be having to choose between their health and a livelihood, because that's actually a daily meal, and that's very difficult. So what the UN is doing is, first of all, putting out there that we have three emergencies. We have a health emergency, we have a humanitarian one, and we have a socioeconomic one. Putting them together to say there shouldn't be choices. The global response should be to everyone, everywhere. And we underscore that if you've got COVID in any part of the world, then everyone is at risk. And so it's really important that we deal with this at the same time. And we say, for want of a better word, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you've got stimulus packages that you can supply, you can find the liquidity to support in the North, then we must also help developing countries, emerging markets do the same. We are, with the health response, you see the WHO on the front lines providing the testing, the tracing, the capabilities, the training of staff, and making sure that people everywhere are safe. The humanitarian space exists in many places of conflict, but you will see that the SG has also called for sanctions to be lifted and for ceasefire. We have one case where it's just a work in progress right now. We hope we can get to the conclusions in Yemen of a peaceful future, because they are suffering in ways that are unimaginable. And then we have the socioeconomic response, in which we are working with governments on the debt issue. And we're also looking to see that fiscal space can be created to ensure we, first of all, strengthen health systems. And secondly, we look to see how to keep livelihoods going, people in jobs, community resilience and engagement, young people engaged in this. And then just to say that COVID might have put a pause on the world for many things, but it didn't put one on climate change, it didn't put one on inequalities or poverty. And so it's really important that while we address the emergency response to COVID, that we keep the SDGs alive, we keep the climate agenda alive, and we use those as deepening the opportunities to build back better. And so where, for example, where we would have had perhaps taken a lot longer to get a social protection program up and cash transfers, now it is an emergency. Now we have to go at scale. And in doing that, we can probably leapfrog a number of areas in many countries that we wouldn't have had the opportunity. Same for connectivity. We want kids to continue learning. So can they do it online at home? That means connectivity. And can we do that at scale now? Is there the fiscal space for that? Water and sanitation. Many things that we can do in parallel. And so we shouldn't put a pause on the frameworks and the agendas that we have. We should try to make sure that we use them to strengthen the response and the Build Back Better.
Thanks very much. And truly, necessity is the mother of invention. And so we have seen acceleration of digitalization, of learning through digitalization and so many other ways. And it's really important to keep those SDGs top of mind. Yeah, thank you. Next question. How is the United Nations addressing the needs of young people now? And are you preparing to support young people in the new normal in terms of mental health, economic opportunity, and the climate emergency?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that we've seen incredible leadership from young people. So it's not just helping them. I think what it is supporting them and traveling in this journey together, not leaving them behind and waiting till we finish with it and then we come back and say, let's have young people. No, they're actually in leadership roles in the UN, forging ahead with many of the innovations that we see put on the front line. For instance, with the Solidarity Fund, a lot of that has been put together by young people and innovators to get innovative ways of leveraging resources for the WHO and for the frontline workers with what we do. It was a number of young people that came together with Global Citizen so that we can come into people's homes and connect with this crisis that has so dislocated, society from one another. But it is also a very stressful time. And here it is many young people worrying about their jobs, many worrying about the future. We will not come out of COVID the same again. So to help engage young people in shaping what that should look like going forward, and perhaps creating that space and convening it for making that happen. On the issue of mental health, this of course is a huge scourge that is growing. Just as we saw gender-based violence, there are a number of abuses in the home that are happening, but I think most of all, when we address mental health with young people, we will be issuing, the SG is issuing a policy paper next week, which takes into account different ways that we need to address this. More importantly, putting together all the tools that are available and helping people connect with people with and with the tools that will help them both at home and afterwards. Many young people on the front line are health workers that are heroes. And I think we sometimes forget many of them are young and being exposed to, one crisis after the other, which right now they are, up there dealing with and they don't even give it a second thought. But the day after the crisis is over, we will need to be there to make sure that we have the support to bring people back together in society and working. So it is uppermost in our minds. I think what we are doing is trying to find better ways to convene and to connect with groups like this. So this is very important. I'm looking forward to all the outcomes from this discussion. So we feed it.
Thank you. I'm hoping that I'm still connected. Can you hear me, Amina?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I just got a little blurb. So thanks very much. We're really looking forward to that policy paper coming out. I think that will be also very helpful to us in working together. I have another question for you. How do you see the role of civil society and youth organizations like the YMCA evolving to provide support and services to the most vulnerable? And how can YMCAs partner with the United Nations to ensure no one is left behind?
Thank you. That's a really good question because we are now working in an environment where it is essential workers that are out there because we're trying to minimize the spread of the virus, and so trying to suppress the virus. And that therefore means in many, many cases across countries, we are all working from home online. So I think there are many opportunities across countries, depending on their priorities, to address this and to be very specific and to try to make sure that we harness the YMCA and its other partners in NGOs, civil society, community-based organizations as partners. For us, the place to connect would be with our UN country teams. We have these in 131 countries. That's a pretty good start. And to connect with them, because they will be dealing with how we leverage the resources for the community work that we need to do. Community engagement, keeping people indoors, away from livelihoods, requires us to be very creative in how we keep both the economy going and people safe. And I think here, any sort of innovation hubs that we can have with those problems put to a group of young people to find the solutions to, is what the UN would really love to see. We're already doing this in a couple of countries where this has been very good in ways and means of connecting on education. It's also been so in how we create wash stations for hand washing in many communities, because it's not just slums that we see people in densely populated environments. It's also in the way we live in many of the compounds that we have across many of our regions, from Asia to Latin America and Africa. And we have to find ways of getting to them with a livelihood, but at the same time, trying to break this transmission. And so I would say that the place to start is with the country teams who have a number of agencies within them, and a resident coordinator who can convene and bring these spaces together in many, many places with many contexts.
Thank you. That will be very helpful for us. And you know, I've heard the term societal PTSD post-pandemic, and I think it really rings true, particularly with young people and their mental health. So we will all have to be prepared for that. And then this whole business of tension between the economy and safety, and reopening the economy, but while keeping people safe, it's a challenge. It's a challenge everywhere.
Well, we're in uncharted territory, and this is why we need to be humble enough to know that we may not have the answers, and that we can have them if we can sit to co-create. I think, you know, this is a time for very deep reflection. This has happened to everybody everywhere, and it has, you know, we've seen inequality in the North and inequality in developing countries, while there is a huge health emergency in developed countries that have also been unable to cope and suddenly realize that many of their health systems have not responded to the elderly, for instance. While we are preparing for that in developing countries, we see that, in fact, the socioeconomic side effects have reached us before the pandemic has made landfall in the way it has done so here. So we hope, and we don't know the answers to it, we hope it won't be as harsh as it has been in developed countries. But what is very clear is that in the coming months and years, many of the gains that we have had in our economies, in emerging markets and developing countries, will be lost. And so we need a concerted effort to try to stop that slide by making sure that whatever we put down now can help us recover better. Now, we're having a huge conversation with the finance sector in the world today. And while there has been some welcome support to our least developed countries, it's not sufficient, because vulnerability today is not just about a manner in which you determine growth. It is about the vulnerability that COVID has caused in every society and what it has done to economies. That those who are relying on tourism, those whose supply chains have been broken now, and we're looking for a farming season and we cannot get those supplies to them, nor can they go out to farm. I mean, these are very serious issues in the economy that will take a long time to recover from. I think communicating and articulating what they are, so that you know, this huge wealth of leadership and I would say capacities from our youth to engage with them is going to be important. So start thinking about the day after right now.
Yes.
And engaging with that. But we need to be explicit about it. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. Somebody says to you, what are the big issues? And then you put a Christmas tree in front of them with so many things on it, they can't see the woods for the trees. We need to be very specific about what those issues are, and then to gather with young people, because this is their future. The day after COVID, they will be leading, it will be their jobs, they will be shaping, we hope, a much better world. We hope people will take this time to really reflect about the needs and the quality of our life, and not the wants and what we have done in the imbalance between our humanity and our environment that has created this.
Thank you so much. Such fulsome answers. Really very much appreciated. Carlos, do we have any questions from our participants?
Yes, Madam President, there's a lot of questions for the Deputy Secretary General. The first on the top of my screen here is from Joan Donnelly. He says, how do we best capitalize on the climate gains seen in the last 8 to 12 weeks just by function of shutdown and not from policy?
Well, that's a great question. And one of the things that happened at the Petersburg dialogues that happened on climate was to see how much engagement that there is in us really trying to say, as we grow back better, one of the things that we see is an opportunity where loans are being taken and will have to be renegotiated after COVID. How can we look at some of the conditions that we can put there for it? So that when you're getting an extension to pay back many loans, can we then say, well, okay, we need to see more expenditure here. This is what we need to see you do in ways that can grow back better. Many opportunities with many of the energy transitions. People have to be kept with power. And so that power, if it's not happening with fossil fuels, we can certainly see that the investments could be made in solar power and extending that. And on climate, I would say that we're already seeing countries who are removing fossil fuel subsidies. What we have to do is to make sure that they stay off and that we continue to invest, find better ways to kick revenues into the economy that are greener, and that it shows greener jobs. So I think the same climate action agenda that we had planned from the summit last year, all the coalitions work that we have is still valid today, and we shouldn't stop pushing that. And I think now is the time to push ahead with it, so that we are in that, we change the narrative, we change the investment response by many as we come through COVID. I think we have to remember that businesses really are informed by their shareholders, and this is a really important time to start advocating and communicating to shareholders that they demand different things are done with their money.
How can and will the UN help to make sure that civil society organizations like YMCAs will survive the financial burden coming out of the pandemic?
Well, I think this is to make sure that when we are looking at the stimulus packages and we are targeting community resilience and engagement, a great part of that has got to do with groups like the YMCA, and we have to make sure they're involved. First, we have to make sure that we understand what it is they're challenged by so that we know what to do to mitigate that. And so for me, I think the decision-making right now, when you are getting debt relief in a country, we have to start asking the questions of governments. So the debt relief for what? If we want a debt standstill for 2 years, what will be those priorities, and how can we make sure that those that deliver services at the lowest level where the most vulnerable are also protected to be able to continue to do their jobs? And that's why this is one of the 5 points in our in what we're doing in the UN response to COVID on the socioeconomic side, is putting a lot of pressure around ensuring that the community engagement and resilience is seen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Madam President. I think according to our agreement, we should let the Deputy Secretary General move to our next function. But may I give you the space for thanking her?
I thank you very much, Carlos. And Deputy Secretary General, again, well, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a meeting, I believe, now with the African Union. And so, you know, from one to another, we're so appreciative of your time and your wise counsel. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very, very pleased to have been able to join you. Please send me the other questions I've not been able to answer. My next meeting was with 14 amazing ministers of foreign affairs in Africa that are all women. And so that for us is really fantastic and an inspiration to me. So I imagine to many others as well. And as we say, women are rising to the challenge. We're not just carrying the burdens, we're also leading where those in power have not been able to do so as well. So, you know, from carrying the burden to leading the way out of this crisis, women at the forefront. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.